Are you ready in the control room?
Ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
I hereby declare the Candioi County Board of Commissioners now in session. I ask that we all please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everyone. At this point, I have a few things I just want to bring everybody up to speed. Since we are on YouTube, I thought I'd share a few things in case you just tune in and all of a sudden it looks like we've been going for a while. Just a little different agenda this time. We had a meeting, the County Board of Commissioners also all serve on the Candioi County Health and Human Services Committee. And we had a meeting with presentations, and they're quite complex, quite involved, extremely interesting, and we're very concerned about what's being presented. But there's so much to present, it's going to spill over into this meeting now for approximately a half an hour. And I really would like to try to keep within an additional half hour. First, though, I do have a few other things to take care of, and that will be paying the bills as well as approving the minutes. I'd like to point out that Commissioner Steve Gardner is not here. He had a previous commitment he had to keep, and based on that, we do have a quorum, but it'll take 3 people to pass any motions that are made. So at this point, Commissioners, you all received copies of the bills, but first I'd like to call on Mr. Thompson.
Sure, we have an addition to the bills, an additional $6,815.74. The largest of those is to Swenson and Sons for $6,133.21. That was a landfill payment that was made to them, to Swenson and Sons. So,
Mr. Chair, I'd move on the bills with those additional warrants.
A motion by Commissioner Emdack.
I'll second it.
A second by Commissioner Nissen. Any further comments? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Pass unanimously. You also received copies of the minutes.
I will move the minutes.
A motion by Commissioner Nissen.
I'll second that.
And a second by Commissioner Anderson. Any corrections or additions? Apparently not. I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. At this point, I would like to call on Tammy Jo and can pick up and continue where you left off. I guess.
Okay, great. Just for any new people on, I'm Tammy Jo Lieberg. I'm the Community Corrections Director for Candioi County. We are going to continue this conversation talking about how the impacts of COVID have had an impact on this complex systems and public safety. So just a quick overview, and then we're going to go through a scenario and kind of discuss how each department plays into this and how we interact. So overall, the challenges faced will be long-lasting between the human impact of COVID through the increased mental health, substance abuse, and the crime, but also in trying to manage the effects of having a backlog in the court system as cases justice response hangs in limbo. The premise of our criminal justice system and the greatest opportunity we have for changing offender behavior is through evidence-based practices, but also incorporating SWIFT and certain philosophies, which were struggling with timelines before COVID. Now we've seen much longer consequences of those timelines. Many of the individuals we work with do not think about possible consequences for behaviors that may or may not happen years down the road. Any concept of deterrence is lost when we look at having, if you act this behavior and you're arrested today, but you actually don't really serve any jail time or have any consequences till 2 or 3 years later. So there is a very big importance for us to actually get through that backlog and deal with these cases in as swift a manner as possible. So when Shane talked about the idea that this backlog potentially, if we look at 12 sentencings a week, to get through that backlog by 2023, it's pretty significant that there's some importance to that, trying to stay on those timelines. So we're going to walk through some cases, and I think the sheriff is going to go first.
If you just look at a general drug case that we end up doing for the sheriff's office, we'll just use the hypothetical 1 juvenile involved, 3 adults. Just in the law enforcement side of things, when we end up going into an incident and doing a 5th degree controlled substance bust, you're looking at least a minimum of 12 of my officers or drug task force officers involved in just the raid, the processing of the crime scene, up until the point where we start bringing in family services, county attorney's office, as well as the corrections side of things. So we have, just those 12, if it's a small case. Once we start digging into something more complex, it's going to be more manpower, more time with that. Then we're also looking at the jail and incarceration side as to what happens and transpires in between. So with that, I'll let them jump in as to what their parts will be as we start to do this arrest process and family services gets involved.
So any new viewers out there, I'm Jenny Lippert, Health and Human Services Director. So when social services receives a call from law enforcement that they have located a situation where a drug bust has occurred and children are present and there are drugs located on site, they give our child protection workers a call. Our staff have cell phones and have them on. We have staff on call that they're available 24 hours a day. Our screening team screens the report immediately. Our screening team consists of an intake social worker, a traditional investigator, a family assessment worker, and then either the lead social worker or a supervisor. A social worker is assigned to the case, and depending on how many families live together in that drug bust house, it can often lead to an additional social worker or two, depending on the situation. The social worker then goes to the home and removes the children. We often will have a case aide accompany the worker, but if they're not available, we need an additional social worker, or sometimes a supervisor needs to assist. These removals can often be difficult as parents can be angry and the children very emotional to have to leave with the workers. Immediately back at the office, the case aides and or our foster care licensor start calling licensed foster homes to see if anyone can take the children into foster care. While the social worker is at the location of the drug bust, we need to speak with the parents right away. We need to get general information on the children. What are their names? What are their date of births? Who do they doctor with? Do they have any allergies? What are their likes, dislikes? It's a very short amount of time that we need to gather really good information. There can often be non-custodial parents who are not a part of that drug bust, and we need to locate them and interview them. We need to gather information as to why they aren't appropriate for placement if we deem that's not who the child should go to. Sometimes there's numerous fathers of the children, and that makes things even more involved. For example, we could have 4 children with 4 different fathers that we need to track down and interview. Staff also try to find out who the children's relatives are and who may be a possible placement option for these kids instead of a traditional foster home. Once the worker has potential relative names, the names have to be run through 2 different state systems to ensure the identified relative will pass a background check. Our staff start calling relatives to see if anyone is willing and viable to take these children into care. It generally takes a while to locate a placement option, so oftentimes the social workers will bring the children back to our office and watch them on our on-site visitation room. Sometimes this can be hours, sometimes it can be, multiple hours, up to a close full day, depending on, again, how complex this situation is. Staff sometimes need to go and get the children food as they're often hungry because, again, this is a short amount of time from when staff are called out and the removal takes place. The social worker then interviews children who are 3 years of age and above immediately after the removal. This can take anywhere from a half hour to an hour to interview each kid. The social worker then typically goes over to the jail and needs to interview the parents. They also need to interview additional collaterals, relatives, neighbors, co-workers, additional families. If the child or children are of Native American descent, then there are additional and different parameters that need to take place for ICWA cases. The social worker forwards the police hold immediately to the county attorney's office so they can get it filed with the court, as there has to be an emergency protective hearing, or EPC hearing is what you'll hear that referred to, set by the court within 72 hours of the removal. Weekends and holidays are not included in that timeline. Sometimes the emergency protective care hearing is set for only 24 hours after the removal. That can be really difficult for our staff, as they need to gather enough information to do a petition. The CHIPS petition, or Child in Need of Protective Services, has to be filed before the EPC hearing, so again, before the 72 hours or 3 days. This petition includes a history that we have on the family, details about the drug bust, details about the interviews conducted and what we've learned, the reasonable efforts that the agency has made, and then we have to make recommendations for services for this family. This document can be anywhere from 6 to 15 pages long. The investigator typically works on this petition after hours, because they've spent the whole entire day with the removal and watching these children, trying to find placement. The next day, day 2, is spent doing interviews and locating potential relatives or fathers, which only leaves them to work on these types of documents in the evenings or after hours. By this time, our agency has identified a placement or placements for the children. Siblings are to be together and not separated. This can lead to a biological grandmother taking non-biological grandkids, or there may be other underlying issues where the child needs to be placed into a facility, a mental health facility, or something of that type. Also, at this time, staff sometimes need to gather equipment. These foster parents or relatives don't have car seats for newborns. They don't have formula if it's an infant. They don't have clothes for the children. There's a lot of things that go into making sure the transition from our social workers over to that foster home is seamless. We are required to do comfort calls between the foster parents and the parents to discuss the child's needs and introduce the parents to the foster parents. This also needs to be done within 72 hours per DHS rules. Within 72 hours, we need to do safety assessments and enter this into our state system. In a drug case, kids have possibly been exposed to drugs, and we need to have them into the clinic or hospital within 24 hours of the removal to do the drug protocol. This involves many tests that are done on the child to figure out how the child's organs and bodies are functioning after exposure. We also need to do hair tests, and I mentioned that earlier. This can be anywhere between $95 and $180 per hair sample. And again, the more children you have, the more tests you have to do. It can become very costly. At 72 hours, we have the EPC hearing, where the parents either agree to leave the children in care, or we need to present evidence and testimony why the child should remain in care. If the judge keeps the children in care, our next step as the agency is to arrange for visits for the parents and children, which typically are done at our office. We also make a referral to Harmony Visitation Center for future ongoing visits. We set up drug testing for parents if they're released from jail. We start implementing services. Services in a drug bust can often include chemical use assessments, drug testing, some sort of mental health evaluations for the parents, in-home parenting education, and then we also try to get the children set up with therapy right away, as often they've been neglected or abused from the parents being high on meth. Over the next 45 days, the investigator finishes up the investigation. We continue interviewing our collaterals, gathering records. We send all of our records over to the county attorney's office. And then once we have all the information gathered, this case then would transition to our ongoing case manager. So I just talked about the investigation portion of child protection. What I just described to you, generally anywhere, it would take a staff member 63 hours to complete what I just described to you. Staff have to do this within 72 hours to get it to the courts, and staff 3 days of work is 24 hours. So you can definitely see that they're putting in a lot of time for a situation like this. So then after it goes into our ongoing team, a new social worker is assigned to the case. The worker goes to the EPC hearing with the investigative and assessment worker. The social worker completes case plans. Sometimes there can be 5 to 6 case plans for each case, and those must be done within 30 days of placement. Each case plan can take about 45 minutes. We coordinate all the referrals, so again, any in-home therapy, if the child needed to be transferred to a different school, if we've got family services lined up. We provide the supervised visits until we can maybe get into Harmony Visitation to supervise them for us. Staff provide transportation to the children and parents for visit needs, again, driving all across the state. The social worker must maintain monthly contact with all clients. Typically, we try to see new clients at least once a week in the beginning. The social worker is responsible to move children if the placement disrupts or court orders change or the court orders a change in placement. We send routine and new updates on all court cases to the courts. If the children were not initially placed with a relative, our staff are continuing to do relative search measures. We're mailing out letters. We're searching the phone books. We're looking through social media and the internet to try to locate or identify relatives for these children. If the children are placed in other counties, it is the worker's responsibility to go and see the child. This makes, again, for a lot of travel time. Currently, right now, we have staff driving to Grand Rapids, down to Worthington, over to Hutchinson, down to Mankato, Brooklyn Park, Minneapolis, up by Fargo. This takes a full day of workers' time to see one child on their caseload. Typically, a staff has 3 to 4 cases with out-of-county travel. The social worker responds to and has contact with any professional that is a part of the case. There's at least 3 to 4 professionals on every case that are contacting workers weekly. They have to enter their time into the state system because per the state, we need to be 100% time reporting for these staff. So every 15 minutes of their day, they're documenting what they're doing. We purchase client items as needed. Again, car seats, gas cards, bus passes for the parents to see their children. The staff attend community meetings as requested. Again, if the child is involved in a different school, they attend school meetings, they attend treatment center meetings, they attend therapy services. And then the staff pay for services. So if we've got parental capacities that need to be done, anger assessments, diagnostic assessments, all ordered by the courts, a worker needs to complete the paperwork to make funding requests and submit the paperwork to the professionals and get it approved by their supervisor. And then the social worker attends many, many court hearings. Now I'm going to pass it on to the county attorney, Shane Baker.
I was just checking time, make sure we were keeping within your half hour. So I said a lot of the timeline earlier, so I'll bridge that. Our scenario we're talking about doesn't involve victims, so that part leaves those issues out. But what we do have here is dual tracks of what our office has to do. There's the criminal side. In this example, we have to get the reports. These are typically arrest situations. So we're assessing whether we can prove the case against the individual. We're not just automatically filing a complaint. So we're reviewing that to get that complaint to the court within approximately 2 days. Next, we're doing a concurrent track with child protection. We have a different legal assistant working on that issue, waiting to get the reports from Human Services to compile a petition for the attorney to review, make changes, and then sign off, and make the filings there. Meanwhile, there's another legal assistant working with an attorney on getting the criminal complaint drafted in the same manner, and there would be multiple complaints if there's multiple individuals. If there's a juvenile situation, still need a complaint type document. It's there in that world, it's called a petition, and then that's filed with the court, and that's a separate hearing than an adult bail or detention hearing. At least at the 5th degree level, these are typically released on their promises to appear and follow testing requirements and other conditions of probation. And that's what Tammy Jo's individuals monitor and provide for the testing and so forth. And it was in the earlier presentation, I talked about how it went from those hearings to the pretrial hearings, possible evidentiary hearings, to potential settlement hearings or trial, the trial prep that goes on with that, and then sentencing, and then any potential probation going in. Child protection, it's 60 days from that example to have a trial, about 6 months to 1 year of working with the family. I'm attending, I would say, 3 or 4 review hearings in the interim. And then if at the end of that time there hasn't been satisfactory progress or the children can't be returned, separate petition is filed to terminate rights. And then that starts another 60-day timeline to finish that case. General Danny.
I'm back again, and I think I'm going to be short on time again, so I get.
We have plenty of time. We can.
Okay, so as you can see from our graph here, all of our systems are interconnected. We start at the arrest, we go to all of these different pieces, and each piece is way more complicated than it probably seems on the outside. So what I wanted to kind of walk through was the fact that for probation and parole, we touch the system at multiple different levels. And just like the sheriff and Jenny and even Shane's office, we pretty much go 24 hours a day. If there's something that happens at 1 o'clock in the morning, they're calling me to find out if we can do a warrant. But in particular with the bail evaluations, if somebody's arrested at 10 o'clock at night or at 5 o'clock the day before, whatever time, my staff have to have a bail evaluation prepared by 10 o'clock the next morning. So in my department, we have people that come in between, they actually check at home now, which was a great thing with COVID that we have the ability to do that, but they check at home to see who was arrested the night before, how many evaluations need to be done, and some of them, if we have a lot, sometimes they're here in my office before 6 o'clock in the morning to start that process to get those done. Because if we don't get those bail evaluations done by 10 o'clock, that sets the entire court system back. And that's one of the things with the probation office. If we don't get our work done, everybody else gets slowed down across the process. So a bail evaluation, we're looking at residency, where the person lives, the severity of the crime, other factors that may be associated with it, and their criminal history. So we have to run a criminal history that looks at local and nationwide criminal history, compile a report with scores, and send that to the court by 10 o'clock to make a recommendation on if an individual should be given the opportunity for bail. We also make a recommendation at times about what conditions of release should be. As part of that, so then once an individual, many times, especially during COVID, we've released many more individuals than we would have in the past, they might go under pretrial supervision. So that's where my pretrial unit is looking at the conditions of probation or the pretrial. They're innocent until proven guilty. That's one of the premises that we have to look at for pretrial. That's very different than a probation case. So we have to be very careful on what types of things we talk to them about, but also what types of requirements we have for them. During that period of time, we might be drug testing, checking their residence, hopefully making sure that they commit no further crimes while they're out on bail. As they go through the process, through all of the different hearings and different things that we talked about that may be put off right now for 2 years, some of the cases that we're looking at that are just being sentenced this year actually started in 2019. And even a few back in 2018, because it takes a long time to get through the system, but with COVID, everything was pushed back. Once a plea agreement is agreed upon, or if they're found guilty at trial, we go to the pre-sentence investigation. So my staff complete a pre-sentence investigation where we go through the criminal history, the severity of the offense again. We complete a sentencing guidelines worksheet that talks about what type of sentence they should receive according to our Minnesota sentencing guidelines. We also go through their family history, their mental health history, any chemical dependency history, their employment history, their education, who their friends and associates are, and we compile all that information and also do risk assessments. Sometimes for a general case, every general case that comes through, we're going to do what we call a LCMI, a level of service case management inventory. But in specific cases, we're also doing domestic assessments. We might be doing mental health assessments. We might be doing sex offender evaluations. It depends on the type of offense. These reports can take anywhere from 4 hours to 15 hours, because they can be 20-some pages long, depending on what that history is involved with that person and what's going on with that case. The probation officer then makes a recommendation regarding sentence and what, if they're going to be on probation, what types of conditions and case planning options should be available based on their risk. Then that case, so then they go back to sentencing for court. So we bounce in at multiple points. The probation department bounces in and out. Then once the person is either sentenced to probation, or if they go to prison, we'll catch up with them on a different time. But if they're sentenced to probation, then we're looking at that risk and needs assessment and developing a case plan. How do we address those criminogenic needs that I talked about earlier in that first part of our presentation to prevent future criminal offending if possible? We're looking at treatment options for chemical dependency, for sex offender, for domestic, we look at gender-specific programming, because we know that men and women commit crimes. Their pathways to crime are different, and how we address them are going to be different. We also look at cognitive behavioral programming to address the criminogenic needs of antisocial thoughts, antisocial personality. Those are those top 4 that we talked about earlier that really have an impact on recidivism. As part of that, so that's where we're trying to address the rehabilitative process. We also look at accountability, and we look at how we can address public safety. And some of that is through conditions. That's where we have community service options. So we have our community work service program that provides multiple different types of work through our community. And we also we've monitored their fines. We monitor participation in other requirements of the court. We look at how often if they have to go to jail. Sometimes we have staggered sentencings where it says that they're going to serve a period of jail time now, and then a period of jail in a year. So the probation officer has to monitor those things. If an individual moves within the state, we have an interstate transfer process that goes from county to county. And if they move out of state, or if they're from out of state at the time of sentencing, which we've seen a lot of lately, we have to follow interstate compact rules. Interstate compact rules are extremely complicated and supersede any state laws. So that gets very tricky sometimes, having to tell the courts that, yeah, we have to follow this rule, not what you said in the sentencing. It's very complicated because we don't want offenders from other states coming here and living without supervision. So we have to be careful that our offenders aren't going to other states and living without supervision and following the appropriate rules. We do drug testing. So there's lots and lots of different pieces of how we manage supervision in probation. If an individual is sentenced to prison, or if because of a probation violation they go to prison at a later date, we then have to manage that reentry process. What that means is completing a pre-parole investigation where my probation officers go out and investigate if a placement after prison is appropriate. We look if the house is even there. And my probation officers will even tell you, we've had cases where people say that they're going to live at a house that doesn't even exist. So we need to make sure that there's a residence. We need to know who's living in that residence to make sure that there isn't any victims or any individuals who might be negative influences when they come out of prison. This is not an easy process because a lot of times people have burned their bridges by this point. They've not only hurt the community in committing crimes, but a lot of times they've hurt their family members, their friends. People don't trust them. So it's a process of how do we find an appropriate placement for them that they don't have the opportunity to re-victimize people in the community, but also provides a pro-social environment. We don't want them going to live in a house that has a bunch of gang members or that is known drug activity, because if we want to reduce that criminal recidivism, we want a pro-social environment. Probation officers also have another added responsibility related to prison cases as we do life review cases. So if an individual has been sentenced to life in the state of Minnesota, they don't actually have a parole. We don't do parole anymore at this point. There's some potential that it may come back somewhat, but probation officers do life sentence reviews. And that means at some point, if somebody has a sentence, that probation officer may have to go in and look at an old case, talk to old victims, talk to victims' family members, talk to law enforcement agencies, because a lot of times with these life sentence reviews are coming 25, 30 years after the type of offense. And so that probation officer has to track down those victims and have conversations with them, whoever is going on, and bring it back to Department of Corrections and say, this is what our recommendation is for the life sentence review. If somebody is sent out on supervised release, then we start that whole process over again, that we're looking at trying to provide treatment options, to supervise their conditions as they come out, deal with violations as they happen, and process through all of those, everything that encompasses a case. So overall, from the time of arrest, almost all the way out to the end of expiration of sentence, we're trying to address that public safety, the rehabilitation, and the accountability. So all of that information, we tried to shorten to a very, I mean, even in an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes, we tried to bring it as much together as we could. And it's a very, very complex system. So we did a very general overview, many different pieces that are a part of it. In closing, I brought this quote forward because it's not just the immediate community safety issues that we're dealing with right now. We also have to look at the fact that all of these impact lifelong systems in terms of we have to stop the cycle. Every one of these children that Jenny talked about that might be involved in these cases, that have parents that are incarcerated, their chances of coming back into the system are increased if we don't stop that cycle as we go through. So the integrating and working as a system and trying to address these things as we go forward is really important for long-term reduction of crime. So with all of that, if we have any questions for any of us now, we'll try and go through.
Sure, if you just wait a few seconds. First off, I want to apologize for the other people that come to, who are on the agenda. I would like to take at least 15 minutes to have some questions, if that's okay with everybody. I appreciate that very much. We had a lot on our plate here this morning, and I believe the commissioners probably have several questions they'd like to ask at this point. Commissioner Amdeck.
Mr. Chair, I think as I look around the room, at least from planning and zoning, the rather routine requests that they have, should we get those out of the way first and then come back after 10 minutes to continue this conversation? So if Eric and Gary can deal with their things, and who else have we got back there?
Okay, and that leaves Holly. Are you okay with that too? Okay. Why don't we just move on then, if that's a request and it's workable?
We'll come back to you. Don't leave.
Yeah, okay. We have people waiting around all over here. I'd like to call on Mr. Gear here, please, Director of Environmental Services, and you have a couple agenda items for us. Please proceed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I do. Gary Gear, Environmental Services Director, here this morning with two requests. The first is we've received application for final payment for LF Cap 2020, which is the landfill project. It was 2020. Swenson and Sons were the contractors, and this is simply the project primarily consisted of MSW final cover, but this is the final payment of $6,133.21. It's been reviewed by our engineering company, ECAD, as well as myself and Ryan at the landfill, and everything seems to be complete and accurate, and so we would request approval for that final payment.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I would be happy to make that a motion, but we already dealt with it when we paid the bills.
For the auditors, for the record that we need to have.
Yeah, okay. I will move that we pay that final payment.
A motion by Commissioner Nissen that
I'll
we
second
pay our
that.
bills on time, and a second by Commissioner Anderson. Any further questions or comments? Apparently not. I'll call for the vote. Oh, please proceed.
This is a follow-up to something else, so why don't we vote first and then?
Okay, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Pass unanimously.
Gary, I have a question. I got a phone call from someone that lives out in that area of the landfill, and as far as I know, we're not digging up any new ground out there, but there's somebody digging some ground up on that road that goes right to the north of the landfill. Are we working on any kind of project there?
Yes.
Oh.
Well,
I misinformed
that
him.
is our clay borrow site for 2021 cell construction. So the
Okay.
contractors, as part of the 2021 contract, needed to find a clay borrow site, and that
Okay.
so it's going a little west of the landfill off of the North Road, 165th Avenue, I believe.
Yeah,
is the actual
that's,
road name.
then I was well, we're not opening a new,
No.
that's
Nope.
what I told him, we're not opening a new,
So you were correct with that,
but,
Lowering dirt.
but it's a clay borrow site. Yep.
yeah, and when you say clay borrow, how long do they borrow from that
that
They never
wall.
they never give it back.
They never give it. Do they reclaim it in some way so it's not an
Yes,
eyesore?
that is part of the contract,
Okay,
correct.
all right.
Okay.
I had to find that out for sure.
Sounds good.
Since you're here.
All right.
All right, moving on to the
Moving
next
on,
issue.
then.
I think we have a
The
nuisance
next
abatement.
issue is a nuisance ordinance violation, that is correct.
You want to show the pictures?
I sure can.
You look at the screen there, you can center it. I'll back it out as you.
So there is one photo. The property owner, this was a site actually that was addressed last November through February. And multiple unlicensed vehicles, and some just simply solid waste items. They were able to get that completed, and ultimately I came to county board and, as an agenda item, but then said the nuisance had been abated and it had gone away. A grandson now has moved into the property more recently, or sometime after February, and has just brought in a lot of things. And so complaints had come into the office. This is the backyard. Just a little bit of a close-up right beside the home. Just, again, miscellaneous items, solid waste. This is on the property looking back out towards 65th Street. That is the road that the property is on. Just lots of miscellaneous items around. And then last photo is a little bit of an attempted cleanup, but the attempted cleanup goes to burning barrels. So that's not the appropriate method as well. I know Eric's department has been out there as well and issued citations to him. So all that to say, it's not being cleaned up legally and not completely. So I visited yesterday the grandmother of the grandson called in and was just letting me know that they were not going to be able to be at today's meeting. Both the mother and grandmother are working and not able to come, and apologetic for the situation, but are just feel they're in a really hard spot to accomplish anything or to work with this individual. So I'm here this morning saying it is still a nuisance that I would be requesting that you give approval for us to move forward with nuisance abatement, as I would then set that up with the county highway department schedule. And other than, of course, the grandmother promised me we'll do everything we can to avoid it because they're not able to afford what it will cost to clean up as well. So they're going to keep at it, but I felt I needed to keep on the agenda as well this morning, showing the information and relaying the position.
Commissioner Emdek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that the property owners have indicated inability to pay for the cleanup, but if we clean it up, it's going to cost more money likely. And then how will that be paid for?
Our cleanup would be a special assessment back on the property taxes. I maybe misspoke a little bit. That's what I was referencing when I spoke with the property owner yesterday. She was not concerned that they wouldn't be able to pay for whatever cleanup they can accomplish themselves. It was not paying for the special assessment. That was what, that would hurt on their part. But, so I am hopeful that they will continue to keep at moving whatever they can within this next little short window or time period before we would show up with the county attorney.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Proceed.
what will that window be for them?
I would expect 2 weeks. I would visit with Todd Miller at the highway department to see when a crew could show up and take care of it.
And that will be communicated to them that they have this much time. Thank you.
I think I know where you're going. But
I would move that we move on the abatement.
okay. A motion to move on the abatement by Commissioner Emdek.
Do we need a date, Shane, for that? We should put a date in there.
What would be a
What is
reasonable?
today?
Today is the 20th.
Is 2 weeks reasonable?
I was gonna
Because, I mean,
say
there's a
August
lot of
15th.
stuff there.
Yeah,
A lot of it looks like it could be recycled.
Yeah, there's a lot of metal there. and
some
that's
metal.
actually got some value.
would
Mr.
30
Chair.
days be reasonable? Doable?
I would be willing to, certainly, I would support that, if that's the board's wishes.
August 20th.
Mr. Chair.
Please proceed.
Oh, I have another question. Gary, how much time has elapsed since you first brought it to their attention and there was some movement, but
August 20th.
August 20th.
Shoot, I didn't bring that letter.
That
with.
letter,
It was approximately June 20th.
Okay.
So it's been about a month right now.
All right.
From when I first contacted.
so have we seconded the motion?
No,
My motion would request that we give them till August 15th.
15th? Is that,
I'll second
a
that.
second by Commissioner Nissen. Any other questions or comments? It seems like a reasonable
Yes.
try to solve this.
You bet.
I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously. Thank you for
All
bringing
right.
that
Thank you
forward.
all.
Appreciate it. Mr. Van Dyken is next. Zoning Administrator, and you have
Thank you,
several
Mr.
of
Chair, members of the board. Eric Van Dyken, zoning administrator for the county, here with 3 requests for approval from the July 12th meeting of the Planning Commission. The first is a request of Timothy Massey. This is a Roseland Township property on County Road 5. Mr. Massey is requesting a home extended business, which would allow him to do some automobile repair on the property. The Planning Commission does recommend approval with 7 attached conditions and findings as you see them in the minutes.
Commissioners, y'all received copies of this, and I think we had a chance to look at it prior to this. Any questions or comments? Otherwise, I entertain a motion to approve the conditions and findings.
So moved with the conditions and findings.
Motion by Commissioner Emdak to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll
A
second.
second by Commissioner Nissen. At this point, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Pass unanimously.
Second item is a request from a siting company for a communication tower, a cell phone tower on property owned by Lyle Hudson and Foster Hudson. This is up in Roseville Township along Highway 23. The Planning Commission also recommended unanimously the approval of this with 1 condition and the findings as you see.
Any questions or comments?
I'll move that.
A motion by
finding.
Commissioner Nissen to approve,
I'll second that.
and a second by Commissioner Anderson to approve the facts and findings. I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
And the third and
Pass
final
unanimously,
request is from Austin Eliason. This is a property about across from the New Barney's store just north of Steffel, well along Highway 23. Mr. Eliason requests ability to work on some repairable vehicles in his grandmother's garage there, and then have a display of some vehicles fronting or facing the bypass, or excuse me, the 2371 corridor there. And his request was recommended for approval with 9 attached conditions in this case, and the findings as you see.
I just
Question or
have a-
comment?
There were some neighborhood objection to this particular project, were there not?
There was.
And as do the findings and deal with those?
Yeah, for sure, and the conditions do as well. So one of the things that happens sometimes is when you send out a notice, you're clearly you're not able to put a full, you don't do paragraphs, you do a short notice of the type of nature of business. In this instance, I think a number of people probably got a little a broader understanding or thought process of what might be there, something much more commercial in nature, open to the public as far as a service station type of feel or some sort of a auto service station. That's not the intent of the applicant, nor do the conditions allow that. You may know and notice in the conditions there, especially as we start out in conditions number 1 and 2, that the conditions specifically narrow down the focus of what the applicant can do on the site. This is kind of a sidelight for the applicant and not his main course of income. So between that and the other conditions and the discussion that was there, the planning commission certainly did look to address the concerns of the neighborhood.
This is it zoned commercial?
No, it's an agricultural zone, and this type of use is listed as a conditional use in that district, up to 10 vehicles for sale. The planning commission actually saw fit to pull that back a little bit and limit it to 7, which the applicant was perfectly fine with, and that's certainly higher even than what he thought he was intending.
One more. I
There was a piece of
noticed Commissioner Emdick had commented that there was something like that had already existed at the location? Or
Historically, there have been vehicles for sale along there for quite some time. There was an old shop that was operated there, I think might even been by the applicant's grandfather at one point. And there have been vehicles for sale along there. Perhaps Commissioner Emdick can speak to that as well. But
Actually, my comment about similar type of operations is there is commercial business there with Barney's across the street and Steffel Well just 100 yards south.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't referring to another automotive type operation.
Well, based on those, I will move that we move forward with the approval of that with the facts and findings as you mentioned.
A motion by Commissioner Nissen. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
A second by Commissioner Emdick. I also like to point out, reading your minutes too, the township supported doing this as well. I recommended that we approve it with all these conditions, and you paid a lot of attention to it. But there was several people that were concerned about having this happening in their neighborhood. I'll call for the vote at this point. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Pass unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay.
Joe's over there.
Okay.
How about Holly?
Yeah, you want to go up there first, or you're going to go back to the questions now at this stage?
You wanted to introduce Holly or then go come in?
Please do.
Okay.
Good. She sat here a long time. She's so patient.
So Tammy Jo Lieberg, Director of Community Corrections again. I'm here and pleasure to introduce our new Executive Director for Prairie Lakes Youth Programs, Holly Booth. I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about herself. So.
Well, welcome, Ms. Booth, and I know you well since I'm on the committee and been meeting with you, and they're a little bit familiar with you as well. I've given some reports about what's been happening, so please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be here and meet you in person. I am Holly Booth, the new Executive Director at Prairie Lakes Youth Programs. I started mid-April. Coming to you from 15 plus years working in the behavior mental health field in the education side. So I was a special education behavior teacher and worked my way into special ed leadership. I was a school principal at a residential site, and now here I am serving youth in our area. It's been great sitting through this morning. All of our services together really come together, and it's great to hear the other aspects and individuals that work with the youth that we end up working with at Prairie Lakes. And so it's really been beneficial for me as well to join this morning. Prairie Lakes Youth Programs, as I arrived in April, as I mentioned, I have found that there are some really great programming and aspects and community pieces in place already, and I've been excited to expand on that and continuing to learn where we are at. One aspect of Prairie Lakes that's very exciting is our therapy dog. I'm not sure if you've heard about our dog. His name is Captain, a giant St. Bernard, in our non-secure program. He is the first within a DOC residential site in Minnesota, the first therapy dog, and we're seeing amazing results with him and look forward to expanding on that. We are also presently partnering with DHS in piloting a suicide prevention program for our youth. And so that's an exciting program that we are working on in connection with our dog Captain. I am looking forward to, as we move forward together at Prairie Lakes, going to the next level and ensuring that evidence-based practices are being followed and that we're current with that. Updating our physical spaces, making sure we're continuing to be in compliance with the DOC requirements there. And I'm really excited about strengthening our community and county partnerships and moving forward to being innovative as we move forward so that we're a site where people are coming to for touring and excited to see and learn about what we're doing. We have 4 programs at Prairie Lakes presently. We have a boys group home, a girls group home. In those programs, we focus on community and family-based services. We have our non-secure boys program where the focus is on independent skills, getting jobs in our community, and learning how to successfully live independently. Then our secure options, which is what Prairie Lakes started with years ago, our detention and corrections program. So we continue with that. We do have a new program opening this fall that we are very excited to be announcing and sharing. We, as others mentioned this morning, are seeing a reduce in the number of youth placed in our secure options with the way changes are taking place, that there's not a need for the entire building for secure placements. So with that, we've been looking at creative options, and there is, as we know, and others in the room talk about, a need for placements for non-secure options. So we are opening a new non-secure program for boys. In that program, we will allow opportunity for our new to Prairie Lakes youth to stabilize, have behavior supports, and then determining their track of if, a group home is the right placement or another non-secure options, or continuing where they're at. With that, the behavior and social skills supports, and that will really make Prairie Lakes be even more of a continuum of services from the secure options to our least restrictive non-secure. So very excited about that, and our wait list has started, and as we know, that need for youth is there. So happy to be with you today. And do you have any questions for me or about Prairie Lakes?
First, I'd like to make a comment too. You hadn't hit the ground running, I believe, the first week or the first day. All of a sudden, you had some COVID cases and,
Yes.
and had to deal with lockdown because of all that, and a lot to take care of. And plus, there's concerns about the facility, because of COVID and because of change in corrections that. There's been a downturn in numbers there, and we serve the whole state, but it's really such an important service to have in our backyard. I think we'd be really hard pushed if we had to take our kids to a distance, some other place further away. But these places are closing down, and we want to be unique in that service and provide that continuum of care. But we do need to put some money back into it to spruce it up, let's say, but it needs more than sprucing up. But since we've been struggling for a long time, am I correct on that? Anybody have any questions of her at this point?
No, just welcome, and
Thank you.
and good luck, and
Yeah.
I think things will go well.
She's a great fit, and we got a great department heads and great staff. It's just a very positive thing at this point that we're moving forward. And thanks for Tammy Jo and all the people involved in that process as well, or getting you. So that was a pleasure. Well, thank you. I better let you go
Thank
back
you.
to work now, but thanks for your
Thank you.
patience being here, but I'm glad you're part of this. You kind of get to know the whole system in the area. And since you are housed here in Candioi County, even though it's 5 counties involved, a lot of time is spent here. Thank you. Have a good day.
Go ahead and keep going. I gotta go get some water though.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Okay.
Would that be, let's take a 5-minute break. Very well. Been an hour. So, hereby,
Stand up.
One.
I hereby call the Candido County Board of Commissioners back in session. I would like to call on Tammy Jo again, and Larry, are you going to be up there too presenting?
After this.
After this, okay. So we're going to open it up to questions. All right. Commissioners, where would you like to start?
Can we just start off with Commissioner Imdick's questions? I know some of it was rhetorical, but then there was some legitimate
Yes,
questions
thank you.
in there as well. So when you look at some of the why people are coming to this area or part of the country, state, for some of the drugs and methamphetamines, for example, we're kind of a hub out here. So it's going to be a little bit cheaper going closer to a source than further out state Minnesota. So that's why you'll see the increased traffic here. With a larger population between us and St. Cloud, you'll see that it's an indicator that those communities are going to be busier with that activity as well. When we look at why is it continuing or why is it increasing, the backlogs that Shane Baker's seeing in the court processes, we are seeing individuals that we are arresting on a drug charge. They're not being sentenced or not getting put through that court process, and they're reoffending a second time before the first one's ever done. So that rate of recidivism is up because of that. They're out, there's no consequences, which I think everybody across the board will agree. When there's no consequences, there's nothing holding you to a standard. You're going to go out and just have fun, and they're out there just going crazy right now.
Okay. Maybe I just kind of follow up on that question. From your department, I see a lot of times there's a lot of people being arrested for drug use and for providers as well. To me, I think it's really important, and I've said this before, that right now a lot of talk about is the symptoms, and we're just keep our heads above water so we don't sink. To dealing with the clients that are coming in and then they have all these needs for services and all the requirements we have. But it's so important that I think that if we can somehow try to deal with the root of the problem, and that'd be the prevention, and that's where I think your department comes in, is trying to have enough staff, enough ability to arrest and stop these people that are producing these drugs and selling these drugs. And then also on the other end of prevention is that we educate the public and the families and the children to be up to snuff on this as well. And do you see, if you had additional people on your drug task force, say, would you be able to make a bigger difference?
Well, anytime you add numbers, yes.
Yeah.
But you got to have that delicate balance between balance.
Yep, and we're worried about that.
Yes. And when we look at the recidivism side of this, some of the systems that you see that are out there right now in the corrections realm is counseling, drug counseling inside correctional facilities, and that continued care. That's a big piece of it, at least for my side of it on the sheriff's office side. While they're in our facility, rather than sitting like a bump on a log in their jail cell or just out watching TV, we would like to see them in some sort of program, some form of counseling, therapist programs. So then that way they're dealing with the problems or the issues as to why they're there. So we don't hopefully have them reoffending or their children ultimately becoming reoffenders. We see it all the time where it's the children that we're seeing now of people that I was arresting when I first started in law enforcement. We got to break the cycle somehow.
Sure. Mr. Emdeck.
Yeah, I think the question that Commissioner Berg is actually asking, and I wonder too, if we had $100 to spend, do we spend half of it on prevention and the rest on, dealing with the symptoms, or how do we, obviously it's going to cost some money, but where is the most effective expenditure of those dollars?
So I don't know if we have a great answer for that specific question and how to divide it up, but I think the question itself is very important because one of the things that we talk about a lot is this is a system. That's why we came together. And every time you have that arrest, if you don't invest in the money from the beginning of the system, like talking about prevention to law enforcement to social services to probation, we have a problem. Because a lot of times we concentrate on one piece of the system and forget about the fact that it goes all the way through. That we have to have invest in the system at every point of the system.
Good way. Commissioner Nissen.
I have more of a comment than a question, or maybe they can deal with, but the problem is much bigger than Candioi County. The supply side is huge, and it's something we really haven't got to stop the supply. It's way beyond what the sheriff can do here in Candioi County. That's a difficult problem, and the cost of this is just mind-boggling. In fact, the whole presentation, I would almost think 3 or 4 hours of work session would be more useful. I don't know if there's a solution that we can come up with that it's not going to take an awful lot of money. And then in the court system, eventually they'll work through that bump. And then what happens? And we have to lay people off, or have we just grown government again?
Well, actually, before COVID even started, I did email Larry saying that I received information from our court system saying that locally the Candioi County Court's judge need was increasing, which is due to the filings from my office. So this is also predating COVID. So it's. Yeah.
But the surge is
Right.
caused by the delay.
In other words, it's a surge on top
of another surge.
to
Yeah.
begin with, which I believe Tammy will hit on a little bit.
It's a very complicated and long-term issue that will take long-term to get out. And the families.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you done, Raleigh? or-
I'm still.
Pause this for a second.
Remember, Gardner said I never quit talking.
No, I wasn't trying to cut you off.
Well, I see this as a social problem as well, and I think that there's a lot of complicating factors. It is just not an easy solution to any of it, and that's the end of what I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, now, my question would be this: is there any light or is there any good news today? I mean, do we see this ending because the pandemic kind of made this explode? Is there anything you see any kind of downtrend on anything, or is this just is what I'm saying is the numbers have gone up? Are they going to go back down? Do you think?
The numbers may go back down to a point. The other side of it, though, is looking at one positive side of it is the research that's coming out is we know how to make a difference. We just have to be able to do it. So when we talk about, Holly talked about it, I talked about it, I think everybody's talked about the evidence-based practices. We are basing what we do on research that will reduce this long-term and stop that cycle. So as we implement these practices and provide these services to community, hopefully we are making a difference because that's why we're here, is to stop those things from occurring in the future.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Emdek.
I'm sure you guys have done this, but are there other models out there? You talked about knowing how to do it. Is that based on the research and other models that have worked it out? And internally or in a broad spectrum, have you put a number to it? And I don't want to hear that number today, but do you have an idea in staffing what it would cost to make a difference based on what Joe just said?
At this point, I think we are all just doing what we feel needs to happen. We're just trying to get by at this point.
No, I meant in order to improve it. You said you think you know how to do it. The research is there, is how to make steps forward. What is the cost, the financial cost for that? And again, you probably don't have it, you probably haven't analyzed it, but it's a question that you must have asked yourselves and as a group are asking yourselves, because in the end, if we're going to tackle this, that's what we're going to have to try to answer and find out for you.
I'll address that first, if you don't mind. So if we look at least on the sheriff's office side, we're driven a lot by statute and rules, especially when we talk about the correctional facility. So yes, I do have a dollar amount that's based on that. And then as well, when you look at best practices, we have been looking at and using different models throughout Minnesota and the nation, and people are trying everything that they can, at least on the officer correctional side of it, So we're trying. It takes time to figure out which model actually works the best.
Yep.
Commissioner Nissen?
Just, I'm wondering if AMC hadn't talked to the legislature about all these issues like mental health in the jails and all of those other problems that we have, and if they addressed it by funding of any kind because of the surge. They must realize that at the legislature as well, or is it going to fall on the taxpayers of Candioi County?
Yes, we talk frequently with the legislators, and they understand that there is a huge problem as well. And part of it also goes back to the whole Medicare, Medicaid side of things. Well, as soon as you're incarcerated, those services stop. So guess who gets stuck with the bill? Your local taxpayers. So that also makes it very difficult for continuing of service. They're passing laws that require us to do exit planning and continuing some form of service for these individuals, but yet we're not going to continue the insurance side of it, and it puts the bill back onto us.
I would just like to comment as well.
That's
As you were talking earlier too, things have doubled, and for a county our size, it's like we have issues and concerns and expenses of a county twice as big. And you look at our county and our tax base of who pays for these services, well, they've just gone through COVID too. And we've been helping businesses survive and farmers and so forth. And for us to fund programs on a community basically twice as big as us is going to be really complicated to figure out. It's almost like a perfect storm, and we're in kind of unknown territory right now with COVID. That just came up, and we had these issues anyway, and now they're even multiplied on top of that. So it's going to be a real struggle. I'm guessing in the next few weeks, and I'm sure Administrator Kleindahl has been talking to you all along about the needs too, and he's putting the budget together and crunching that down, that you'll come up with some options for us to look at, and with all this in mind. But are there any other questions or comments from anybody at this point?
Well, I think.
Please proceed.
Jenny wanted to follow up on my question, and then I'll throw this one in at the same time.
Sorry.
You mentioned cars that are going up to Grand Rapids and Worthington and different parts of the state. Is there any out-of-county support, financial support for those, or is it our residents that move there? And okay.
Yes, so we take the burden of those costs when a child is placed in another location and there are county of residents. You had asked a question, Commissioner Imdek, earlier about race and if we're seeing that. I will speak just to what we're seeing in child protection, but we aren't seeing a true correlation between any sectors in our community. We are, however, seeing individuals who are popping back into the agency multiple times. A lot of this prevention work falls back on public health. And as you all are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic had diverted our true public health preventative work that we usually do in the county for a whole year and a half, and we're just starting to remake our way back into looking at some of those things. So I think as we regroup public health efforts and we look at prevention, we do a CHA, community health assessment, community health improvement plans, strategic plans on an ongoing basis. This will be one of our main topics that we'll be focusing on is mental health, substance use, everything that we've kind of discussed. But again, as I stand here with the colleagues behind me, you can see that it's not one situation or one area's problem, it's the ripple effect. So again, how do we tackle this big project? I don't know. We are internally throughout the agency trying to do some proactive measures, having more family home visiting nurses going in with child protection, trying to do some early intervention or looking to that model for mental health issues. But again, it's a very big task for us to tackle. And I think the four of us together, as we were putting numbers for the budget, is when we kind of came to the conclusion that, okay, we have to work together to solve this for our community. It's not one agency or one department that can do this alone. So to some of your questions, I think that's something that our group with Administrator Kleindl will need to wrap our heads around to see what type of things we could potentially come back and propose to you with some maybe solutions.
This has just been an excellent presentation to put this together. We're so used to just seeing silos again, the county attorney's office, family service, community corrections, or sheriff's department, and putting it all together, it really gives us a big picture. And that is our role, to see this big picture, but it's also educating the community too. This is very complex, complicated things we do here. And it sounds so simple, well, we just do it, we don't need to do this stuff. We have to do these things. Commissioner Nissen.
I'm concerned about this system that forces you to drive to Grand Forks and to Duluth and everywhere else. Maybe the State Department of Health or the State Department of Human Services could look at a model that would be a little more efficient by using folks in Grand Forks to take care of the people that move. And it just seems, like you say, that's windshield time that wastes an awful lot of valuable time that you could be working with folks that are actually here. And I don't have, other than just making the statement, I don't have a solution, but it sounds like the systemic problem of how to deal with those folks that move for whatever reason, maybe to get away from scrutiny. But if they were set up to have someone in Grand Forks or Duluth to scrutinize those folks, it would save a ton of time windshield-wise. Just a thought.
Okay, Administrator Kleindall?
So how we can reduce that windshield time is prevent it from even happening in the first place, because what we're doing is replacing kids where the service needs are. And so if we put our money into the birth through 5 and make sure that the kids get a good start, give the parents the support they need to parent, to give the resources to the schools so the kids can stay in school, that's how we prevent it.
And I think we're really caught in the middle, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a little bit larger counties that have maybe more of the resources that can do more of the prevention. And yet we're seeing more people coming to our community because of the fact that we have the apartments or homes that they can rent and live in. We have the jobs, we have the seasonal work, but yet we don't have the necessary resources to do all of the prevention work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any further questions, comments from anybody? From your point of view as well?
Just one more comment, and
Please
that was
proceed,
the
Commissioner
scope
Nissen.
of this whole presentation is just a lot to absorb in a half an hour or an hour.
Yeah.
I would, if I could have someone email me the PowerPoint,
Yes.
that would be a very good start, but it's just going to lead to more questions, I'm afraid. But just to be able to absorb that in such a short period of time is difficult.
And that'd be very helpful for us to, as we talk to the public as well, in the different committees or wherever we end up, to have those figures, because they're not all up here today.
Yeah, and a work session, like I mentioned earlier, because we're going to have to deal with this at some point, and very soon, I suspect,
Maybe.
and I don't know if we have any brilliant ideas at this moment.
No, but we can keep picking away at it, and we'll get there. Nothing else. I want to thank you again for coming in and spending all this time putting this together. It's very important information, and planning is so crucial to this whole thing. So thank you. Well done. I don't like what you had to say, but well done. At this point, I would like to call on Administrator Kleindall, and you have some information about the Pioneer Land Library.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, members of the public. Been working with Pioneer Library. Our lease is up on January 1st, 2022. And because I'm in the budget process, I wanted to get the lease negotiated early so I know what to put into the budget. In the past several years, we've done 5-year agreements. And each year, other agreements has been a 3% cost of living. And then, we've had 10 years of that. We've been doing 5-year increments, and so the last 2 has been a 3-year cost of living each year. However, because of COVID and 2019 and the things that the library system had to go through, I thought it would be fair this time for 2022 to hold the cost at the same level it was in 2021. And so I am recommending to the county board, and I have also worked with the city of Wilmer, and we have come to a verbal agreement that we'll do a 2-year lease agreement. In 2022, it would remain the same as this year's at $44,430.34. And in 2023, it would be a 2% cost of living. And because of the unknown, then in 23, we can renegotiate the contract and probably go longer than a 2-year agreement. So that's my recommendation.
Okay, Commissioner, we have a recommendation. Is there any comments or questions? If not, can I have a
So
motion?
in 2023, the cost would be, go up to $45,318.95.
I'll move that we-
A motion by Commissioner Nissen to approve the lease agreement as stated. Do I have a second?
I'll second
A
that.
second by Commissioner Anderson. Any further questions or discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Pass unanimously. Thank you.
I'll start out the next one, and then I'll turn it over to Mel and Todd. Mel has been talking to me for the past several years about the need for a sweeper. And up until this point, we have delayed that decision just because of the cost, the timing. Doing the budget for 2022, I noticed that Mel had it in his budget request this year. I believe this sweeper is a need. Commissioner Nissen and myself also get calls from the public regarding our trails. And so what happens now is that Mel and Todd Miller have to contract it out and get somebody to come in and do it. I believe by taking out, we have money in reserves right now this year to keep the levy down. This would help keep the levy down for 2022. If we buy it this year, it would help us adjust the levy that I'll be presenting to you in a few weeks. And as you can probably see from the discussions, the levy is is a challenge to try to keep where everybody wants to keep it at. So Mel, I'll turn it over to you, and you can explain what the sweeper is and how it does. And
Mr. Odens.
Morning, Commissioners. As Larry stated, I've been kind of bugging him in the last few years. Some of you may recall in 2017, we did a trail plan. And the basis of the trail plan was responding to a need of the public. And the need of the public is they want a good trail system for, we are a regional center for vacationing and camping, et cetera. But there's so many areas that we start a trail and then we just have a gap. And so the primary purpose of this trail plan was to close the gaps in our system and provide a logical destination that's safe to the user. Well, so what we've done then is we've gone after a lot of transportation alternative federal money grants, and we've been very successful in that. In fact, we've probably, I'm guessing, over $1 million in the last 5 years on just building out trail systems in federal money. Diamond Lake, Games Lake, we're doing the one on the North Shore Drive in 2 years. We're doing 3 in the next 3 years. But every time we do a grant, it's on your handout. There's a little resolution that we do. I've clipped that in there, and the resolution states, the sponsoring agency hereby agrees to assume full responsibility of the maintenance of that trail. Well, one of the things as we expand our trail now into 22 miles, we've never really done other than like patching or crack filling, but there's also an element of expectation for the user for being swept. So in the spring, when there's sand. So I talked to Larry and I said, we probably should look at some year getting a little more serious on a trail sweeper, a smaller sweeper, because we spend about $20,000 a year now. And why am I here? I'm here because it wasn't included in any budget, and we are trying to realize the statewide health improvement partnership, SHIP, is willing to give us $7,500 toward the sweeper because they feel it's also goes toward their reasoning for existing to promote walking and biking. So I'm gonna let Todd talk about, we would do the 22 miles plus the 26 miles of other things, the small towns. But maybe I'll have Todd talk a little bit about what else we do with it.
Okay. Yeah, as Mel mentioned, it's 22 miles of trails. But all these small towns, they got curb and gutter. We got rural curb and gutter areas like north of Candy, Ohio by the cemetery there. And around Green Lake, our parking lot at Salisbury Beach is one of the problematic areas because of the weekends. There's a lot of broken glass, a lot of debris and stuff that the guys are just hand brooming right now. And it takes a long time for those individuals at corrections to pick it up and clean it. Or we would feel this would be a much better time saving and a cleaner job to get a job. And then around Green Lake, there's always construction, and with marathons and different things going on, we could just buzz around there, clean up the mess, debris that the contractors leave, and have a safer course for the joggers, runners, whatnot. But yeah, I mean, county part or throughout the Health and Human Service building parking lots, uptown parking lots, things like that. We could do it ourselves. It'd be more time efficient, and I think it would save us a lot of money and a lot of phone calls.
One of the questions I had was, okay, we buy this and do we need staff to run it and so forth, but you're doing the work already to a large degree, and except you can do a better job this way and meet our responsibilities.
Yep, exactly.
A
Yeah.
question?
I
Mr.
do
Anderson?
have that picture you show of two options doesn't look as though it might be very useful for removing snow, which is one of the complaints I had from the Games Lake Trail. They want to use it all year around. Is there a solution for that?
Actually, the top picture, the cab one, that you can take those front brushes off and you can actually get a push blade for it.
Well, that is very good news.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Show it up on the screen.
Okay.
He's got
Yep.
that.
There you go.
There we go.
That thing is really cute.
This option here.
Yeah, I think that
Chris,
one's definitely.
Commissioner Emdek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wondering if either of these Zambonis can be fitted with a vac. I know that on Green Lake, a big issue is, and throughout any communities that have storm sewers where the salt in spring ends up, salt and sand ends up in the stormwater.
Yep.
And just turning over rocks for financing, it might be a grant opportunity for Middle Fork watershed in the cases where that watershed is affected, but I don't know about the timing of all of that. Are you considering a vac and doing this for others?
The one unit does have a vacuum capability. I don't know about this one. That's why we're looking at a range, just because it would give us a little bit of a latitude to get something. Because you're right, Commissioner Nixon, we get the same request in the winter. And we haven't crossed that bridge yet because, that's always the risk when you provide something that the public really likes, then you do more. But we just heard it, there's implied other costs, but we feel that we actually could be more efficient doing this than the way we do it today.
A question and a comment. I'm wondering too, the importance of purchasing something like now, we might be saving money with the price of so many vehicle type of stuff going up in price. And the other question is, for a motion, then what kind of motion would it be? For a dollar amount?
Yes.
To approve it, and how much would you?
I think the appropriate action would be to give us, to authorize staff within this range to purchase a sweeper in fiscal year 2021.
Okay.
Because it was not in the budget, so this would be something that we would use. So if there's never been a formal approval for this, spending this kind of dollar, And then it also, what we would do is when we do purchase, like in our case for the state aid contract, we get it cheaper than what we budget for. So there is a dollar savings that the 21 budget doesn't actually go up, if that makes sense.
Commissioner Nissen.
I would happily move that we give you that range of 94 to 115,000, is that? Yeah, to purchase this trail sweeper.
And the chair will
with a
second that
snowplow
motion.
attachment.
Any further questions or discussion? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Pass unanimously. Thank you for bringing this to us. And Mr. Kleinall, you are going to address broadband again.
As you know, I'm part of a broadband committee, along with Roger and Raleigh. Our broadband committee met on the 12th, and we had discussions. As you recall, during our work session, during our work session, we talked about broadband regarding the ARP funds. Come to you before you today to ask you to authorize American Rescue Plan funds for the 141st Avenue Northeast area. That's in the New London Township. And there's 37 homes that are in the unserved area. And what they're asking is that Candido County take the American Rescue Plan funds of $35,000 and put it toward this project for broadband.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve that.
A motion by Commissioner Emdack to approve the request for $35,000 of ARP funding for broadband.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Nissen. Any further questions, comments? If not, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Pass unanimously.
Mr. Chair, as long as I'm up here, I want to talk a little bit more about the ARP funds. We still don't have the guidelines of what the reporting guidelines are. They're still working on developing them. Our first report is due August 31st, so I would think the instructions for us to learn how we have to send our first interim report in will be there. Some of the questions that came up today during the presentation is, can we use American Rescue Plan funds for the public safety piece that was presented? And that would be an option, because most of the stuff that the county attorney's office, family services, and probation showed would be COVID related, and it'd be to help deal with the backlog. So that might be an option. We can address that more when we talk about the budget, but that would be a resource that could be available to you. With the understanding that the ARP funds go away in December 31st of 2024, and knowing that this probably is going to be a little bit of a longer term system. Most of the time, if you add positions, sometimes you can, through attrition, you can drop things out, but I'm not into guaranteeing that, because I have no control over that. But just so you're aware of that, that would be an option. I still want to work with, once we find some of the guidelines and stuff with the ARP dollars, what are some other things that we should be looking at? When the budget is done, I would like to form a committee, like we talked about. I think that's still a good way to keep the commissioners involved, and we could break those up in 3 or 4 different areas. And I would have each one of you be on some of those committees to help make those decisions. We continue to get questions about, can we have these dollars? People want those dollars. And so I would, it would be nice to have a system and a process to get that in place. And so we'll do that. And so I'm telling the public that's watching today, we haven't developed a plan yet, but that's not because we haven't been thinking about where we want to put this stuff. We're doing it. We're waiting to make sure we have the right use in the right places at the right time. We're learning with our audit that we're going through right now with the CARES funds. We thought our committees had everything in place exactly and had everything Ts crossed and Is dotted. And we're finding some challenges that they're questioning us how we did things. And so even though we had good guidelines, we thought we followed everything to the T, there's still some questions that pop up about it. And so we want to make sure going into, we have a lot more time to use the ARP dollars. And so we want to make sure we have a process in place. I agree with every one of you. I think broadband is going to be our primary focus for the ARP dollars. I believe in the next several board meetings, the broadband committee will continue to vet these. And I want us to tell you, the broadband committee is not rubber stamping stuff. There's good discussions going on and looking at what areas we should be funding and not funding, and why we should fund it, not fund it. And so by the time these get to you, there's been some good dialogue. And there's really some good process going on. I'm really proud of that committee. It's been working hard for a lot of years. So that's my update on regarding the ARP funds. Any questions that you may have of me regarding ARP?
Just a comment about the county board and the county priorities. Broadband, as you mentioned, is one of our main priorities. But I'm kind of listening to everything, and we really have three priorities we're looking at: broadband, dealing with meth, and as well as dealing with the COVID-19, because that is not totally gone, and dealing with all the trails connected with it, as we're starting to hear what's happening. So that's going to be our priorities, and I just really encourage all the commissioners that we're on different committees, and these are probably priorities these committees could look at. PAC 4 for families. Maybe we can get them to make this a priority. The drug-free coalition, meth could be a priority. Anyway, the list of committees go on. If we take a broader approach at that individually with all our committees and encourage the community to address that as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay, the next up, the governor, Walz, did a state proclamation. And I'll read that proclamation, and then we also have a resolution from the county. But the state of Minnesota proclamation, whereas the county employees serve as a cornerstone of their communities, dedicating their time, skills, and expertise for the benefit of their neighbors, and whereas the work of county employees is essential and often in person, whether that is performing newborn well checks, renewing tabs at licensing center, processing voter registration and ballots, and whereas the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted county services delivery and program administration, creating uncertainty for employees and citizens on accessing essential services. And whereas county employees continue to provide vital community services in 2020, showing exemplary leadership by taking personal risk, assuming new duties and responsibilities, and innovating new models of service and delivery. And whereas through their dedication of county work and commitment to public services, county employees kept counties open and their communities safer, healthier, and productive. Now, therefore, I, Tim Walz, Governor of Minnesota, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, July 27, 2021, as County Appreciation Staff. So that's a pretty nice honor. And I want to also, in your packet, I have a proclamation of County Appreciation Staff on behalf of the County Board. And I will go ahead and read that on behalf of the county board. To our employees, and I just want to say to our employees that are watching, thank you for your services. Thank you for everything you've done and everything you do. We appreciate it, and we recognize the great work you have done. So, proclamation of County Staff Appreciation Day. Whereas county staff serve as a cornerstone of this community, dedicating their time, skills, and expertise for the benefit of their neighbors. And whereas county staff went beyond expectations, taking on personal risk, continuing to deliver essential services to the citizens of our county during the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas, in addition to their regular duties, many county staff were called upon and accepted new and challenging responsibilities during the pandemic, such as expediting and distributing of thousands of dollars in economic recovery appropriations, empowering the survival of our local businesses, community, successful managing and divulging mail-in ballots in an unprecedented federal election, and retooling local public health, education, outreach in flattening the curve. And whereas, although the state has turned the corner on COVID-19, county staff continued their explanatory work, assisting with recovery through vaccinations rollouts and preparing the American Rescue Plan multi-year recovery effort. And whereas the work of county staff over the past year and half kept their doors open and our community safer, healthier, and productive through the months unprecedented global transition. And whereas President Surveyor of the Board of Minnesota's Associated Minnesota Counties requests that the Office of Governor and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan proclaim July 27, 2021 as County Appreciation Day, and the request was granted. Now therefore, we, the Kansas County Board of Commissioners, proclaim July 27, 2021 as County Appreciation Day and extend our thanks to the staff of our county and express deep gratitude for their commitment to excellence in public services during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dated this day.
Commissioners?
Yes. You want a motion?
Absolutely.
I will make that motion.
A motion by Commissioner Nissen, and do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Anderson. Any comments or questions? Commissioner Amdek?
Yeah, certainly we appreciate all the hard work and extra work that a lot of employees did, but in addition, there was a lot of volunteers that got involved too, that weren't getting paid. And kudos to Public Health, reached out to a bunch of businesses, and there's going to be an appreciation event of some kind for volunteers. That might be an internal thing, but we want to recognize all the volunteers that stepped forward.
67.
Yeah, and the number of hours they put in, and it was pretty amazing.
We have a great county, we really do. And we have to deal with some tough issues and headaches and problems, but if we didn't have the staff that we have, I think they'd be a lot worse. And we're very fortunate. And I just wish we would have had more time. The county gets so big, and to be able to walk around and just personally thank people. I mean, it's hard to do, but we really do care about our staff.
And I do have a request on for that if you pass the motion.
Sure. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously.
Thank you. So on behalf of our staff and stuff, on the 27th, I'm hoping you get an opportunity to walk through and greet some staff and do that. It'd be great if we're a private agency, we could give them some type of recognition and stuff, but we're limited in what we can do, so.
Yes, I think it's an excellent idea as well, and maybe you can give us more information about a good way to approach this as that day comes up. I do have a question on the proclamation. How are you going to get a copy of that out to each staff?
We'll put it on the intranet.
Okay, all right.
And we'll hang them up. We'll be having signs where employees enter into their workplace. We'll have signs that are up that date also.
Awesome. Thank you.
Very good.
All right. And I guess at this point in the agenda, I will, any other administrator updates?
Yes. I want to talk a little bit about the budget timelines. We'll be talking a little bit about the budget on Thursday when we have our road and bridge meeting. I want to continue to keep the budget in front of you as much as possible. So
Good.
The faster Mel talks at that meeting, the more time I'll have. But we want to do that. On your timelines that I gave you regarding the budget, I'm moving some dates back just because we don't have the insurance information that we need. Okay. So waiting for our co-op to get our insurance numbers to us. And so I'm going to push some of the dates back, but I was wondering, the week of August 23rd, would that be a good week that we as,
23rd.
the week of that, sometime in that week, if we could get together as a board and select department heads? That we could get together and discuss the budget. And so I was hoping maybe around the 24th or the 26th.
Either one
Either?
works.
Yeah, either one works for me too.
24th or the 26th?
The 26th, I have a meeting at 5:30, but
Well, would be, my recommendation would start at 8:30, would schedule most of the morning, but I don't think it will take the most morning, but I'd like to have that scheduled out if we needed it.
okay.
I'm wide open on the 26th. The 24th, I have a meeting in the morning.
Okay?
26
You're open until 5, right?
Yep.
26th?
works here, so I think that's our date, 8:30 on the 26th.
What are we calling that?
Budget meeting.
Just a budget meeting? Okay.
So, Commissioner Anderson, what we do is generally what, I will go through the initial budget line by lines, and then we select half dozen departments. They'll come and present and tell us some things that they're going on, what's facing. Kind of what we did this morning was kind of laying groundwork, what's might be influencing some of the budget stuff. So that's what we kind of do. I also kind of tell you how I put the budget together and why, we do what we're doing.
Okay.
And we will get a copy of the budget ahead of that date,
Yes.
so we can actually.
Yep, and because of the sizes of, it's probably best to come and pick them up because you'll plug up your computer.
Yeah.
And then I will meet with the chair and the vice chair probably the week of August 9th. We'll work with their schedule. And so Commissioner Anderson, what we do is I usually, because I can only meet with 2 people because of Camila. So I go through the budget process with the chair and the vice chair, and they usually yell at me a couple times. Right, Raleigh?
Yeah, right.
No, just kind of give an idea, am I on track or not? Then I have a week to make adjustments from what they give me guidance on.
Okay.
So there's a whole process, but it'd be nice if we could talk to more than 2 people at a time. All right?
Okay. Do you want to set a date at this point with?
The 26th?
Yeah,
For
but
that?
the date.
I'll get a hold of you two.
Okay.
So the 26th, we're meeting as a board as a whole, and I'll get that out. Is there certain departments that you for sure you want to hear from on the 26th? If not, I will put it together.
Yeah.
If you had,
I think that's the right way to approach it.
Well,
that's what we, yeah. but-
Because you'll have a better feel for who really needs to be here and explain.
Yep.
It's a breakfast meeting, right?
So Shane, put it on your calendar.
Yeah, who's bringing breakfast?
Is this if this is a breakfast meeting, we'll invite anybody who doesn't have a budget increase.
Oh,
There you go. Okay.
well, that means they'd have to, because just with the cost of living, with the agreements we have in place, that's a
Well-
2%. So I mean, that's almost impossible.
I would think you've been doing a very good job of presentations for the last several months from the different departments. So we have a pretty good feeling where they're coming from, what the needs are. So there is not a need for them to be here. And I suppose if there is a need, we can ask you can get a question and answer it from them, or we can contact them.
By doing what we did today, I think it's laid some good groundwork, just so you have information, background.
Yeah.
Mel coming and talking about the sweeper, helps,
Yeah.
So it's a process.
Yep, very good process. Okay. Anything else? Are you done with your updates? Okay, any appointments or calendar information? We've pretty well addressed those.
Well, just one thing.
Yes.
The fair is the week of August 10th or 11th through the 14th.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the, as you know, last December 15th, we were going to have a big to-do about the 150th year of the birth of this county. They're going to do that, the Historical Society is going to do that on the 13th, Friday the 13th at 1 p.m. So I will give a very short presentation, and I think there's going to be cake and refreshments, but it would be nice to have the rest of the commissioners there as well.
Yep. Also, August 3rd, after our next board meeting, Jill Winuka will be here to talk about the 150th year.
Okay.
In the afternoon, the Historical Society is going to be having an event for the
Yep.
coffee pot.
The coffee pot, yep.
Yeah,
That was going to be in my,
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I just want to.
Okay.
oh, fine. Well, that is coming up too.
Okay. Well, speaking of that, then, are you prepared? Do you want me to go first?
Oh, you're going to pick on me first, okay?
Yeah, I think we did last time, though.
Yeah, right, just a minute.
We'll get the shorter report first, and then we'll move into, oops.
I had a bunch of meetings. First of all, a meeting came up called the Local Advisory Committee, which I'd never heard of before, although it's apparently, because of COVID, kind of got sidetracked for a while, but all counties are required to have a LAC, Local Advisory Committee for Adult Mental Health. And so we're reviving that committee. They're required to provide recommendations as to how to take care of the adults with mental health issues, review and evaluate local mental health services, and at least on a quarterly basis, and provide recommendations specific to changes, additions, and improvements to the local mental health delivery system. So that is going to be, going forward, a bi-monthly meeting. And I don't know if everyone got an invite to that, or was it just me that got picked on, but I'm with Woodland Centers and West Central Industries, so it makes a lot of sense for me to be on that committee. That's the one. EDC broadband, Larry covered that, I think, pretty well. And we did talk about a variety of expenditures, and the only one that we dealt with today was the 141st Street, but there's we're working steadily, and I don't know, I got to get a hold of, when are the meeting with the townships? Is that tonight? Because I won't be able to make that.
Tonight, for sure.
Okay. But that's moving along. The federated folks are working very hard to make it feasible, and we have good cooperation with the townships. Hopefully that'll continue, and hopefully we'll be able to take care of a couple of more townships very soon with the broadband dollars. Vision 2040 housing met, and they're looking to set up possibly, or maybe the legislature required it, I don't know, but a local housing trust fund. City/county would create it. It's funded by public revenue. Minnesota legislature provided the funds, okay, and can be used for rehab. And we have a number of rehab issues in the city of Wilmer particularly, but I'm sure throughout the county. There's a lot of single-family dilapidated homes in the city of Wilmer because they've been turned into rentals, sadly. The Highway 12 East corridor, as you come into Wilmer, those homes have been there for many, 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 many years, and they need help. And then, of course, every time we have a meeting, the mobile home park on the west end of town comes up. So a lot of things to do there. Candy-Ohio County Historical Society meeting. That's we're having on the September 18th and 19th. This is a fundraiser for the Historical Society, and we're having Railroad Days, which is appropriate because Wilmer was kind of the epicenter of the railroad development in western Minnesota, and for years have had a lot of had their roundhouse here, and so that's going to be September 18th and 19th. There's a $20 fee, but there's going to be all kinds of activities you can participate in. I don't know if I'm close enough to this or not, but that's the one item. The next item, Larry already alluded to, the August 3rd, the coffee pot dedication and the 155th county anniversary display will be up and running in the Historical Society itself. And also we're going to have the meeting at the fair. We're going to be adding a research room, which is the funding is coming in really well for that. I won't say any more about that. Woodland Centers, they're asking for a 1% increase in the POS, which back in the old retail days was point of sale, but I think it stands for something else there. Payment of services or something like that, purchase of services, so. What do they call it? Acronyms?
Yes, we
Right,
got
you know,
several,
after
don't we?
7 years, it's driving me crazy. Chippewa River Watershed, we submitted an application for one watershed, one plan. It's still being evaluated by Bowser. Hopefully, we'll get something, but there were 11 applications total. Holly from, who's now our director from the Pope County SWCD, said sometimes only 2 get selected, but there was more money appropriated this year, so there is a possibility that all 11 might get funded. But you're talking 250 grand a piece, so that's a lot of money. We'll have to wait and see on that. Our share of the budget will remain the same at $2,100 because it's set up by acreage. So we have less acres in the watershed than Pope and Swift. They're the biggies. They have a big number. Glacial Ridge Trail. We met yesterday in Starbuck. We have a new member of our committee named Nan Haggerty. She's a new board member of the Pope County Board, and she's quite a go-getter. So she had organized a meeting up there with a pulled pork sandwiches and the whole 9 yards. And we went and looked at a park they have in Starbuck, which having grown up, like 6 miles from there, I had no idea it was there. And they were talking about the issue of removal of buckthorn. And then one guy went on forever talking about that, so I'm not going to do an imitation of that. But that was very interesting. We also discussed our goals for the next 60 days. I just completed an inventory of signs, and I have to talk to Mel about that. There's a couple of signs that need to be in our county that need to be redone, so I'll do that. And Prairie Woods, I'm going to let Roger talk about Prairie Woods. So that's it.
Okay. Roger, you wish to go next?
I have a thought in my mind that I'm not going to express, but
That
well,
I
I
passed
will.
the buck.
Speaking of going on forever,
Yes. I thought you weren't going to express that.
Prairie Woods met last night, and there's a couple of good news items out of there. Is that the soggy land, which is one of the first things that came up when I became commissioner 8.5 years ago, is finally owned by Prairie Woods Environmental Learning Center. The Baroque addition that they're working towards is a process because part of their terms is to not do it all at one time. I went to planning and zoning a week ago. The viewing before that we have to do in order to consider the applications. I tried to attend the National Association of Counties meeting, and just here to tell you, do not try to do it in a hybrid fashion in the future. It was just really frustrating. The first day we had no audio. And it was like, what's the point here? There's no audio and there wasn't captions either, so that was frustrating. The good news there is that our colleague from Ramsey County, Mary Jo McGuire, was voted in as second vice president, so she will be our future president for National Association of Counties.
Very good.
We already talked about the broadband, and Middle Fork Watershed District is looking for a new manager as Margaret Johnson has moved on to a different position. Mel and I attended the Transportation Alliance meeting in St. Paul last Thursday. I think it was a pretty productive meeting. It wasn't all that crowded in the room, but there was some good presentations about state and federal funding and a lot of different programs that provide some opportunity, and we saw some opportunities in there for Kennewick County. And that's it.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I just had a couple regular committee meetings. One was a community transit meeting that was on July 9th. I guess they talked about volunteer drivers. State legislature changed some wording in the laws where when they get reimbursed, they basically just get reimbursed mileage, and some of that was changed now. So I don't think they have to declare it as income. I think they can consider it like a regular expense, which was important because we need the volunteer drivers. It's a great tool that they have to get people to and from doctor appointments and different things that, you know, people normally couldn't get to on their own. The other meeting I had was JD2 redetermination of benefits down in Renville County and in Olivia. And that was just basically giving the okay or go ahead for the redetermination of benefits down there. And then last week I went to St. Paul for the it's called County Government 201 for the Association of Minnesota Counties. It was a summer conference for the new county officials and staff. I guess there were also auditors and treasurers there. We had several people speak. I'll just kind of talk about a couple of them. One was one that's the state demographer, Susan Brower. She gave a really good presentation about demographics in our county. She also talked about the census, and it's a lot later this year because of COVID and the lockdown and all that, where they couldn't do all the census taking in an orderly fashion. So it's going to be a lot later, and we're going to really be kind of crunched when the county finally gets the different census numbers, so that for redistricting and different things like that for election officials. And another one was we went through parliamentary procedure. A guy by the name of Roger Reinhardt. He was a very interesting speaker, talking about rules for civility and different things on how to conduct meetings, which I thought was kind of fun or interesting. You wouldn't think it could be interesting, but he made it interesting. Another one we had was strengths-based leadership. A gal by the name of Martha Roth. She gave kind of a presentation before the meeting or before this seminar and stuff. We had to go online. We had to answer a whole bunch of questions and do this survey to see what our strengths were and I suppose our weaknesses as well. And then it just focused on our strengths. And so that was about it for me. So
Okay, well, it sounds like quite a bit. AMC does such an excellent job with that introduction that they have. I wouldn't even mind going back and going through it again. So well done. I'd like to start out actually, though, not about a committee, but just call to everybody's attention and to the public's attention too, that our community lost a very important leader this past week, and that was a former commissioner, Earl Larson. And Earl was a Candiota County commissioner from 1971 to 1994, 23 years as a county commissioner. He also was president of AMC back in 1984. So his family is quite a loss to have, of course, and in a situation like this, and I guess our thoughts and prayers are with him too. He was 94, and at that time he was in a nursing home, but fairly recently, we understand. But it's a loss, and I just want to recognize him as a county commissioner, what he accomplished and did. And being a commissioner back in those days was a lot different than being a commissioner today in some aspects anyway. And I was always remembered him as one person that was always, we were talking about thanking the employees, he was always thanking employees for the well job they do. And he also watched the budget very closely, if I remember correctly. Okay, I was also on the same committee, so I was hoping Commissioner Anderson, you'd go on a little bit longer about community transit, and then I wouldn't have to give a report. This was our first meeting that we had in person, and we met downstairs. And it was an excellent meeting. We were spaced out really well with the tables there. And it was a pretty large committee with the three counties involved in the cities, and it went really well. The ride shares or the rides are increasing. They're starting to bounce back. They've been very busy dealing with COVID stuff yet, and they're still doing Meals on Wheels, and it's unbelievable how many they've accomplished in doing that. And they're still in the process of ordering their vehicles, and that's kind of a setback there, if I recall. And also want to share that there was a new appointment to the operational committee, and that's Jeff Philippek. I don't know if anybody recalls Jeff. He was the leader of the YMC, director of the very first director of the local area YMCA. And I remember from back then that he started the whole process of building the new Y program, and he's back in our community, and this time he's also going to serve on that because he's has a position connected with where is that? With the community health, I believe, with Candioi County and Renville County. So that's a good connection there. I was also, what other committee? Oh, the EDC. I'm on one of the subcommittees of the EDC, and that's the Business Retention and Expansion and Recruitment Workforce Subcommittee. And the EDC has kind of changed their process, as we know, and restructured and having some subcommittees instead of the way it was operating before. And on this committee is Sam Bowen and myself, Jim Ellingson, Les Heike, and Jennifer Mendoza, as well as Mr. Backman. And we're looking at a subcommittee of this fall, possibly having 20 high school students visit a few local businesses that we have, and to give them some idea about future employment and careers, but also keep in mind careers in Candioi County, what's available, and there's really quite a need for that. And there's also talk about planning a summit with workforce partners and businesses, and to discuss some definite goals we have, and especially recruitment and finding employees as well. At this point, I have nothing else to add. Does anybody else have anything else that they want to add at this point? And we ran over, not too bad, 7 minutes. We'll hereby adjourn the Candioi County Board of Commissioners.